Hello, my name is Brent, and I'm a front-end web developer at Aten Design Group. In this screencast, I'll be showing you how to get Gatsby set up to connect to your Drupal site. So to get started with Gatsby, we need to first install the CLI. So I'm on the Gatsby site. I'm going to click Get Started, and this will send me to the docs underneath the Get Started section. And we're going to copy this npm install global command and go back to our command line and run that command. Okay, now that the CLI is installed, we can run Gatsby-h to view all the options, and we can see there's a Gatsby new, and that's to create a new Gatsby project, and that's what we're going to use. And I'm going to title mine Gatsby site, and you can title yours whatever you like. So let's run that. Okay, that's been successfully set up. Now let's cd into the Gatsby site. And to start the development server, we just need to type Gatsby develop. Now to view the Gatsby site in your browser, just going to copy that, hop back over to the browser, open up a new tab to view our Gatsby site. So this starter Gatsby site currently has a home page and a second page, and we're going to use this home page to insert content from Drupal. Now to be able to pull in content from Drupal, we need to install the Drupal source plugin. We're going to go back to the Gatsby site and go to plugins and search for Drupal. I'm going to use the first source plugin. This has the most downloads, and I think it's done by the Gatsby team. I'm going to copy the install command and go back to the terminal. We're going to stop the server, and let's run the install for the Gatsby source Drupal plugin. Okay, now that the node package has been installed, we need to add the configuration to Gatsby. Let's go back to the plugin page. This is the code that we need. So in your gatsby-config.js file, underneath plugins, we need to add this code. So I'm going to copy that. Let's go back to the command line, and I'm going to open up my code editor of choice, which is VS Code. Okay, now I'm looking for the Gatsby config, and these are all the plugins by default that have been added, and I'm going to add it right after the last plugin. And now we need to update two things. We have the base URL going to this other site that isn't ours, that probably won't work, and the base API is set to API, which we actually need to use JSON API instead. So let's go back to the browser and get the URL of our Drupal site, and I can replace the base URL with our Drupal site like that. Okay, everything looks good here. Now let's go back to the browser and add content to our Drupal site to be able to pull in via the JSON feed. I'm going to add two basic pages. So home page and an about page. Okay, now that that's completed, let's go back to our terminal and let's run Gatsby develop again. Okay, now it's ready, and one of the URLs we need to go to is the graphical in-browser IDE for Gatsby's GraphQL. So I'm going to copy that, and let's go back to the browser and let's paste that into a new tab. And Gatsby uses GraphQL to pull in all of its data that goes for Drupal content. markdown content or any other source that you add. And in this IDE, we can create queries to pull in the data that we want in our Gatsby site. Now to begin, you can use this reference above. One of the easiest ways is, let's start with curly braces, is their auto completion. So if I press Control space, it will auto populate with all the available options. And I already know I'm looking for all node page, so I'm going to select that. And now I have this red squiggly line, this error, and to bypass knowing everything that you need to do after the fact, a shortcut is to just build this or generate the query, and it'll actually pre-populate the minimum query that's needed to pull in all node page, which is really nice. So I can see that we have 2 nodes, but let's add some more fields so we know what we're pulling in. And again, you can do Control space to see what options you have. And it'd be nice to get the title and then also the body. And same thing here, we got the error, but if I build it, the query, I can get all of the available options. And I see a few things that I don't necessarily need. I don't need processed and format, or even the summary. I'm not utilizing the summary. And that's a really nice feature of GraphQL. I can return exactly what I want. So I'm going to delete it and just pull in value. So now I'm successfully able to query Drupal's API and pull in the 2 nodes that exist. But what I'd like to do is just pull in the home page. And for GraphQL, you can actually create query filters. On the all node page, we can just query or filter this to view just the one with ID, whatever. And so we're going to do that, and let's change that to the Drupal ID. Okay, so that looks good. And there is some help here about a query, an argument value. And if you know what you're doing, you can always just type in the filter. But I'm going to show you a source in the Gatsby site. So if we go to the docs again and use the search, and I'm going to type in filter, and this is what we're looking for right here. So I'm just going to select filter, and this shows me the GraphQL or graphical interface filtering markdown that has a title that doesn't equal an empty string. So all markdown that actually has a title is essentially what it's pulling in. And this is close to what we want, and we can copy this example from right after the all markdown remark to the start of the curly braces that pulls in all the content. So I'm going to copy that. Let's go back to graphical and paste that here. Now we don't have front matter in our Drupal content, so we need to remove that. And just to let you know, what we're looking at is everything below node. So the UUID, the title, the body, everything that's underneath node. We don't have front matter, so we can safely remove that. And also the corresponding closing curly braces. And let's change title to UUID. And don't run anything yet, because you need to copy the UUID of the node you want. So I'm going to copy the UUID for the home page. And yes, this probably isn't the best solution, because if they delete this page, we will have an error. But if we pulled in the title, you know, there might be another node with the same title. So there are other ways of accomplishing this, but this is a pretty simple example. So we're going to copy that home page UUID, and we're going to change not equals to EQ or equals. And everything looks good. Let's press query, and bam, now we can see just the home page. So this is the query that we need to add just the homepage content on the Gatsby homepage. So we're gonna use this in just a bit, but first let's go back to the Gatsby site. We've only really looked briefly at the files, and to change the pages in the Gatsby site, it's all within the source and pages. And of course, this is a starter, so there are other components and images that are here that can be used or removed. But we're going to look at the index.js. So this is the homepage, and to prove that, let's just make a quick change. So I'm going to change this to an H3. Just type in test, save it, and let's go back to the browser and look at our site. And with hot reloading, it's already been updated. So great, working just fine. Let's go back to the editor, and we want to change this function right here to be able to render out dynamic content and do other things. And this is like the most simple example, and we need to change this just a little bit. So instead of parentheses, we're going to change that to curly braces, and we're going to add a return with parentheses and move our content within that. Okay, that looks good. If I save it, let's make sure I didn't break anything. Let's go back to the website. Everything looks good. Another good practice is to open up inspect, and let's look at the console. So no errors. ESLint will add errors here as well. So another reason why you want to have the console open. And going back to our editor, let's start creating our query. We're going to type export const query equals GraphQL, and then backticks, and in that we're going to add a query. Okay, so that's an empty query. All we need to do is go back to our graphical and copy our query. So within the curly braces, I'm going to copy our query and go back to our editor and paste in our query. Let's save it. Before we go back to the website to test it, let's actually pass in the data, and before the return, we can do a console log of the data. So instead of just data, we're going to do data all node page. This is exactly what we need to display our query results. So I'm going to save that and go back to the site, and I can already see that we are successfully pulling in our data. So within edges, we have one node, and here's the UID, here's the title, there's the body, so everything's looking good. Now let's actually start displaying that content in the page, and to do so, go back to the IDE. Let's deconstruct the data a bit. I'm gonna create a const, and let's call this homepage. And we're only really returning a few things, but it's always nice to simplify this and deconstruct it. So I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to type data all node page, and then the edges, and we're only returning one, but it's always good to just, obviously we need to specify this and the node. Okay, that deconstructs that and puts all that content into this. And now that constant is going to be useful when we're returning our values of our homepage content. So now I can just do homepage.title. So before I would have to do data.allNodePage.edges. You know, it's just kind of overkill to add all that every time. So now we can just do page.title, which is really nice, good practice to get into. I'm going to press save and go back to the browser, and bam, we can see our updated title. But let's add the body content. And to do so, I'm going to put that content in a div, and inside the actual div here, I'm going to use the React dangerously set inner HTML to render out directly the HTML content. And this just says to React, like, hey, this HTML content is safe to display. And so we're going to pull in homepage.body.value and press save. And let's go to the browser to view it. We can see our content. The only thing, let's see, I want to do is move that link. It's just more of a visual thing. Okay, let's go back. Looks perfect. And now we are able to successfully pull in content from our Drupal site into our Gatsby site. And let's add a second page. So we created an about node and home node, and in our graphical we have the query. So what we can do is just copy this. Let's do another query but remove the filter, so it'll look like that. Here we removed the old query, and let's return both pieces of content. And what I really wanted was the UUID of the about. And before we do anything with that, let's go back and let's cheat a little bit. And I'm going to copy all of this code in the index. Let's actually just create a new page. I could just edit this, but for now, let's create a new one. We're going to call this about.js. And let's paste the homepage content, and we need to obviously update a few things. So instead of index page, we want to rename that to about page. And we're going to update the link. Obviously you would want to do this in a navigation, but for this simple example, we're just going to change that. And instead of home page, let's rename that to about page as well. And so that's done. Let's see, is there anything else we need to change other than the UUID? Nope, that looks good. Let's hop back to the browser to get the UUID. Okay, let's paste that in here. And we need to do one last thing. Let's go back to the home page, and instead of page 2, let's send it to about. And that's another reason why we didn't about / we didn't want to use that page -2 because we would have to use that URL. And let's actually clean it up a little bit. Let's delete that. No need for that. Let's double check everything looks good. Awesome. Okay, let's save and let's go back to the browser and go to our Drupal site and refresh. And it looks like we have an issue here. I'm going to go back to the terminal and let's kill and rebuild the Gatsby site. So everything was fine. The error was, obviously while it's in this development mode, it's not going to like when you start deleting pages. So all you have to do is regenerate the Gatsby site by running Gatsby develop. But I do see we have a couple warnings, and this is probably good to take care of. So using global GraphQL tag is deprecated and will not be supported in version 3. So let's fix that. And it gives us a way to fix it, which is awesome. So in the home and the about, let's fix this. It's super easy to do. So we copy that and let's import it in the about and also in the homepage. Perfect. Now let's go back to the site and refresh. Just make sure everything's good. Okay, awesome. Oh, one thing I need to do is just update the label. But we got our homepage, the about page, and it's using our Drupal content. So let's update that link. And one last thing, let's update the content in Drupal, and just to kind of make sure that it is pulling in content and update content, we're going to test that really quickly. Let's go back to the command line to stop the development mode, and let's go back to the browser into Drupal, and let's go to the content and let's update the content of the about page. And so that looks fine. And then in the home page, and that is good. Okay, so now let's go back to the command line to start Gatsby develop again. Okay, now let's go back to our site and refresh. Okay, we can see the list in the about page. If we go home, we can see our subtitle. Everything looks great, and it is working like it should.